Jason Tyler never thought a third beer would save his life. With his wife Alexis away on a work trip, he had the rare chance to relax alone. A few cold ones, bad late night television, and the comfort of a quiet home. He rarely drank more than 2 beers, but tonight was an exception. That decision had consequences. By 2 a.m., his bladder was protesting, forcing him out of bed. He swung his legs over the side, rubbing his stiff knee. Then a sound. A deliberate, slow creak. Jason froze. It came from the back door. His pulse spiked. Every instinct told him something was wrong. Without hesitation, he reached into his closet for his Winchester 12-gauge shotgun. It was an old habit drilled into him by his father, a former cop. Rack a shell first. That sound alone is enough to send most burglars running. Jason took a slow breath and pumped the action. Clack, clack. The heavy sound cut through the silence. Then, forcing his voice to stay even, he called out, "Come on in. I've got something special waiting for you." Silence. Then, bam! A door slammed. Jason rushed to the window just in time to see a shadowy figure scrambling over the fence. Something metallic clattered onto the pavement. For a split second, the intruder hesitated, snatching up whatever had fallen before vanishing into the alley. The neighbor's dog erupted into a barking frenzy. Porch lights flickered on, but the stranger was gone. Jason grabbed his phone and dialed 911. "Somebody just broke into my house." His voice was tight. "They ran, but they're still close." The dispatcher's voice was calm. Too calm. "Are you safe right now?" Jason gritted his teeth. "I think so, but if you send someone fast, you might still catch them." But the response made his stomach twist. "We're prioritizing other emergencies. Officers will arrive as soon as possible." Jason clenched his jaw. Other emergencies? What, like coffee breaks and paperwork? He hung up, still gripping the shotgun. Somewhere across town, Sandy Mason sat in his car, heart pounding. What the hell just happened? This was supposed to be the perfect night. The plan had been flawless. The timing, the route. He even spent weeks walking the alley to get the neighbor's dog used to his scent. But exhaustion had dulled his edge. Turns out committing the perfect crime wasn't easy. Tonight was supposed to be the night Jason Tyler disappeared for good. Alexis would be free. She might not have said it outright, but Sandy knew. She wanted this. He clenched his fists, thinking back to 6 months ago, the day he met her. She had walked into that first staff meeting, her skirt just a little too high, her gaze lingering a little too long. "Hi, I'm Alexis Tyler." That voice, smooth as silk, hook, line, sinker. From that moment, Sandy was done for. Then, last month, he overheard her chatting with a coworker. "Sometimes I envy you, Susan. Being single sounds amazing." Susan had laughed, complaining about a terrible date, but Sandy knew better. That wasn't for Susan. It was a message. "Get rid of Jason. Set me free." The duplicate key in his pocket felt cold as ice. He had made it the day Alexis left her keys on her desk. A silent invitation, he was sure. He had rushed to the hardware store, copied them, and was about to return the original when she suddenly came back early from a meeting. He panicked. He couldn't just hand them back. Too suspicious. So he dropped them near her car in the parking lot. Later, when she found them, she had no idea. But now everything was falling apart. As a police cruiser rolled past, Sandy slouched in his seat, barely breathing. He waited 10 agonizing minutes before starting his engine and driving off. His hands trembled. His plan had to be adjusted. This wasn't over. An hour later, Officers Jones and Shepard finally arrived at Jason's house. Their flashlights swept through the rooms. Nothing seemed out of place except for the unlocked back door. Jason knew he had locked it, but the skeptical looks between the officers made it clear. They didn't believe him. After jotting down some notes, they turned to leave. As Jason shut the door, he overheard them joking outside. "Peter, I could really go for a donut right now." "Same, maybe 2. Laughter echoed down the street. Jason exhaled slowly, his hands gripping the kitchen counter. He was too wired to sleep. Instead, he brewed coffee and buried himself in paperwork until the sun came up. By 7 a.m., he called Alexis, leaving out the whole break-in ordeal. She would be home that evening. No point in worrying her yet. By 1 p.m., a locksmith had replaced the back door lock and installed alarms. Jason was already considering a full security system. That night, when Alexis arrived home, she found herself locked out. Her key didn't fit. Her stomach twisted. Jason wouldn't change the locks for no reason. A flash of panic hit her. Her mind went back to a conversation months ago after watching a movie about infidelity. "If you ever cheat on me," Jason had said with a half smile, "don't expect a fight. I'll just change the locks and file for divorce." Now, standing outside her own house, locked out, her heart pounded. But why? She hadn't done anything wrong. With shaking hands, she dialed Jason. He answered on the second ring, voice calm but cautious. "Hey, babe." "Jason, what the hell? My key doesn't work." A pause. A heavy pause. Then he said something that made her pulse spike. "I thought your flight landed at 6:30. Alexis blinked. What does that have to do with anything? Why are the locks changed? Jason exhaled. "I'll explain everything when I get there. Just hang tight, okay?" Alexis gritted her teeth. "Fine, but hurry. And for the record, I have to pee and I'm not in the mood to wait." Jason muttered an apology and sped home, blowing through red lights. Exactly 20 minutes later, he pulled into the driveway. Alexis was waiting, arms crossed. Her glare could cut steel. But the moment Jason stepped out, her frustration cracked, just a little. A quick peck on the lips, then she stormed inside. Jason followed, already pouring her favorite craft beer. When she finally took a sip, her voice softened. "Now explain why I was locked out of my own house." Jason told her everything. Her face drained of color. Her hands trembled. And for the first time in a very long time, Alexis felt something she hadn't felt before. Fear. As Alexis and Jason made their way back home from their morning run, the conversation about Sandy Mason still lingered in the air. Alexis was frustrated, but Jason's instincts told him that her discomfort ran deeper than just a botched audit. There was something about Mason that unsettled her, something she hadn't yet put into words. "Do you think he's dangerous?" Jason asked, tossing his sweaty towel onto a chair as they stepped into the kitchen. Alexis hesitated, grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge. "I don't know. I mean, he hasn't done anything outright threatening, but he gives me this off feeling." She sighed, running a hand through her damp hair. "I tried to push it aside, but ever since that work trip, he's been watching me." Jason frowned. "Watching you how?" "Subtle things," she admitted. "Like when I'm in a meeting and I glance up, he's already looking. If I pass by his desk, he suddenly stops typing, like he was waiting for me. And then there's the way he lingers whenever I'm having a conversation. It's like he's trying to find some hidden meaning in my words." Jason clenched his jaw. He had spent enough time around men to know when someone had crossed from admiration into obsession. "You should document everything," he said firmly. "If he ever steps out of line, you'll have proof." Alexis nodded, but Jason could see the exhaustion in her eyes. She took a deep breath and changed the subject. "Let's just enjoy the weekend, okay? I don't want this creep taking up any more of our time." Jason agreed, but in the back of his mind, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Something dangerous. That evening, they went out for dinner at their favorite Italian place. For a few hours, the weight of the past week lifted, and they laughed over shared memories and inside jokes. By the time they got home, Alexis seemed lighter, as if she had finally pushed Mason from her thoughts. But Jason couldn't. Around 2 a.m., the house was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of settling wood. Jason lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Something felt off. Then, creak? His breath caught. That sound again. A slow, deliberate noise coming from outside. Sliding out of bed carefully, he moved to the window, peering through the blinds. The backyard was still. Nothing seemed out of place. But Jason knew better than to ignore his instincts. He quietly retrieved his Winchester from the closet. This time, he wasn't taking any chances. Moving through the house, he made sure every door was locked, every window secured. But just as he was about to head back to bed, tap, tap, Tap. Jason froze. Someone was outside. His grip on the shotgun tightened. Heart pounding, he approached the back door and flicked on the porch light. Nothing. No movement. No footsteps. Just the faint rustling of leaves in the wind. But as Jason turned away, a shiver ran down his spine. On the glass of the back door just below eye level was a single smudge. A fingerprint? Someone had been there, watching. Jason didn't sleep that night. By morning, he had a plan. When Alexis woke up, she found him at the kitchen table, sipping coffee, his laptop open in front of him. "I ordered security cameras," he announced. "They'll be here tomorrow." Alexis blinked the sleep from her eyes. "Jason, what's going on?" He hesitated. He didn't want to scare her, but she deserved to know. "I think someone was outside last night," he admitted. "I heard something. When I checked the back door, there was a fingerprint on the glass. Fresh." Alexis set her coffee down carefully. "Are you sure it wasn't from before?" Jason shook his head. "I cleaned that door yesterday. It wasn't there before I went to bed." A chill passed between them. "You think it was him?" she whispered. Jason didn't answer. He didn't have to. Meanwhile, across town, Sandy Mason sat in his dimly lit apartment, scrolling through his phone. The footage he had recorded of Alexis earlier played in a loop. She was perfect. The way she walked, the way she laughed. He had convinced himself that she was sending him signals. The complaints to HR? Just a test. She wanted to see if he would fight for her. And he would. Jason was the only obstacle. Sandy's fingers tightened around his phone. Jason had been lucky the other night. But next time there would be no mistakes. The thought of Alexis locked outside her house had sent a thrill through him. He imagined her standing there, vulnerable, confused. And then Jason had to ruin it by showing up too soon. Sandy needed a new plan, and this time Jason wouldn't get in the way. Sunday evening, Jason decided to check the backyard again. Something about the break-in attempt still didn't sit right with him. As he moved toward the fence, his foot caught on something. A small glint of metal reflected in the setting sun. Bending down, Jason picked it up. A key. His blood ran cold. It was a copy of their house key. Someone had made a duplicate. Someone had planned to walk right in. Jason's hands shook as he turned the key over. No markings, no numbers. Just a simple, unassuming key. But Jason knew what it meant. This wasn't random. It was targeted. Someone wanted inside their home. And Jason had a sickening feeling that he already knew who. Jason didn't tell Alexis about the key. Not yet. He didn't want to scare her more than she already was. But he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. The security cameras arrived Monday morning, and Jason wasted no time setting them up. 2 in the front, 2 in the back, 1 covering the driveway. The footage would stream straight to his phone. That night, he stayed up watching the live feed, waiting. Hours passed. Midnight. 1 a.m. 2 a.m. Then, movement. A shadow flickered near the fence line. Jason's heart pounded. Slowly, he reached for his phone, zooming in on the footage. The figure moved cautiously, sticking to the darkest corners of the yard. Then it crept toward the back door. Jason tightened his grip on his shotgun. Whoever this was, they weren't getting away this time. As the days passed, the weight of secrecy grew heavier on Sophia. Every interaction with Jake, every glance exchanged in the office, carried an unspoken tension. She knew she couldn't keep this hidden forever. The truth had a way of revealing itself, and deep down, she feared the moment when everything would come crashing down. Ethan, her husband, had begun to notice the subtle shifts in her behavior. The late nights at work, the sudden guarded expressions when her phone buzzed, and the way she seemed lost in thought more often than not. He tried to brush it off as work stress, but a nagging doubt lingered in his mind. One evening, as Sophia sat across from him at dinner, she could feel his eyes studying her. She forced a smile, attempting to maintain normalcy, but Ethan wasn't convinced. "Is everything okay?" he finally asked, his voice careful but probing. Sophia hesitated before nodding. Yeah, just a lot on my plate at work. Ethan exhaled, leaning back. You know you can talk to me, right? Her heart clenched. If only it were that simple. The next day, Ethan's unease led him to do something he never imagined. He checked their phone records. It wasn't about distrust, it was about understanding why his wife seemed so distant. What he found made his stomach drop. A particular number had appeared repeatedly over the past few weeks, calls and messages at odd hours. He didn't recognize it, but something inside him told him it wasn't just a work contact. Later that night, while Sophia was in the shower, Ethan copied the number and ran a quick search. When the name Jake Carter popped up, his blood ran cold. Jake, the man she worked with, the one she had mentioned in passing. The pieces started to fall into place. Ethan wasn't one to jump to conclusions, but the unease gnawed at him. Instead of confronting Sophia right away, he decided to observe. He paid closer attention to her patterns, her demeanor, and the way she seemed to guard her phone. Then, one evening, as he was waiting outside her office to surprise her with dinner, he saw something that shattered his trust entirely. Sophia and Jake stood by her car, their conversation intense. Then, for a brief moment, Jake reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. It was an intimate gesture, one that spoke volumes. Ethan didn't wait for more. He turned around and left, his heart pounding with a mix of anger and heartbreak. That night, Sophia walked into the house to find Ethan sitting in the dimly lit living room, his expression unreadable. We need to talk, he said, his tone calm but firm. Her breath hitched. Ethan, what's wrong? He lifted his phone, showing her the call logs. Why have you been talking to Jake so much? Sophia's world tilted. It's not what you think, she whispered. Ethan let out a bitter chuckle. Then tell me what it is, and don't lie to me. Tears welled in her eyes. She wanted to deny it, to find an excuse, but the truth sat heavy in her chest. I never meant for this to happen. Ethan's jaw clenched. So it did happen. Silence. That was all the confirmation he needed. The silence between Sophia and Ethan was suffocating. The weight of unspoken words, the shattered trust, it all hung in the air like an impending storm. Ethan stared at her, his expression unreadable, waiting for her to say something. Anything that would make sense of what had happened. Sophia swallowed hard. Ethan, I never wanted to hurt you, she finally whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan let out a slow breath, shaking his head. But you did. His voice wasn't raised, but it was firm, steady, and filled with something far worse than anger, disappointment. She took a step closer, but he stood his ground. I didn't plan for this. I didn't go looking for it. I was lost. And Jake, he was just there. Ethan let out a bitter chuckle. That doesn't make it better, Sophia. It makes it worse. Because instead of talking to me, instead of letting me in, you turned to someone else. Her heart clenched. He was right. She had no defense, no excuse that would erase the pain she had caused. Ethan ran a hand over his face, exhaustion evident in his posture. I don't even know where to go from here, he admitted. Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. I love you, Ethan. I don't want to lose you. He studied her, searching for sincerity. Do you love him? Her breath caught. She hesitated. Not because she didn't know the answer, but because saying it out loud would make it real. I don't know, she whispered. Ethan exhaled sharply, his jaw tightening. That's all I needed to hear. He turned away, walking toward the door. Where are you going? She asked, panic creeping into her voice. He didn't look back. I need time to think, and honestly, Sophia, I think you do too. The next few days were agonizing. Ethan moved out temporarily, needing space to process everything. Sophia was left alone in their home, haunted by memories of what they once had. Jake reached out, but she ignored his messages. She couldn't turn to him, not now, not when she had already lost so much. She spent hours replaying everything in her mind, questioning her choices, wondering if she had thrown away something irreplaceable. One evening, after what felt like an eternity, Ethan finally called. Can we talk? Hope flickered in Sophia's chest. Yes, please. When they met, he looked tired but calmer. I don't have all the answers yet, but I need to know. Are you willing to fight for us? Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. Yes, more than anything. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. Then we start from here, but it won't be easy. She reached for his hand, holding it tightly. I know, but I'll do whatever it takes. Rebuilding trust wouldn't happen overnight. There would be doubts, difficult conversations, and moments of pain. But as they sat there, holding on to each other despite everything, one thing became clear: love was still there. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to begin again.